Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. I finished up the book that I wanted to share with you guys today, sharing from Dr. John Coleman, his works. And what I'm going to do tonight is share chapter two from Edward Bernays' book, Propaganda. This chapter two is called The New Propaganda. So we're going to read from the book here, and it shouldn't take too long. We'll see how that goes. I don't like to go too long because a lot of times people can only do a 30-minute, 40-minute type of deal sometimes when they go to work or whatever. So here we go. Again, this is from Edward Bernays. This book was written in 1928, so this book is almost 100 years old. Actually, it's 95 years old. And they are, as far as I know, they're continuing to use this because people just do not understand what is really going on before them. So here we go, the new propaganda. In the days when kings were kings, Louis XIV made his modest remark. I'm going to say this, Lestat said Moye, he was nearly right, but times have changed. The steam engine, the multiple press, and the public schools, that tree of industrial revolution, have taken the power away from kings and given it to the people. Well, not necessarily, okay, but that's what they want you to think. But public schools have actually, in some ways, have actually brainwashed you also. They may have given you ability to read and write, so to speak, somewhat. But anyway, the people actually gain power which the king lost, for economic power tends to draw after political power, and the history of the Industrial Revolution. Hold on a second here. Industrial Revolution, and let's see where we at here. Have taken the power away from kings and given it to the people. For economic power tends to draw after its political power, and the history of industrial revolution shows how that power passes from the king and the aristocrats to the bourgeoisie. Universal suffrages and universal schooling reinforced this tendency, and at last even the bourgeoisie stood in fear of the common people, for the masses promised to become king. Today, however, a reaction has set in. The minority has discovered a powerful help in influencing majorities. It has been found possible so to mold the mind of the masses that they will throw their newly gained strength in the desired direction. In the present structure of society, this practice is inevitable. Whatever of social importance is done today, whether in politics, finances, manufacturing, agricultural, charity, education, or other fields, must be done with the help of propaganda. So he's telling you the truth in what he's doing. You see, the whole idea of propaganda is to get you out there with his sales works to get you buy things that you really don't need. You see, it's just wants, and then it puts you in debt. It puts you in debt, it puts you into slavery more and more. Propaganda is the executive arm of the invisible government. Universal literacy was supposed to educate the common man to control his environment. Once he could read and write, he would have a mind fit to rule. So ran the democratic doctrine. But instead of a mind, universal literacy has given him rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with publishing scientific data, with the tribularies of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought. They're telling you that basically we don't have original thought. We usually grasp from others, is what the part of the whole thing with schooling is also. So here we are. Each man's rubber stamps are the duplicates of millions of orders, so that when those millions are exposed to the same stimuli, all receive identical imprints. It may seem an exaggeration to say that the American people or public gets most of its ideas in this wholesale fashion. The mechanism by which ideas are disseminated on a large scale is propaganda in the broad sense of an organized effort to spread a particular belief or doctrine. I'm aware that the word propaganda carries too many minds an unpleasant connotation, yet whether in any instance propaganda is good or bad depends upon the merit of the cause urged and the correctness of the information published. In itself, the word propaganda has certain technical meanings, which, like most things in this world, are neither good nor bad, but custom makes them so. I find the word defined in Funk and Wagner dictionary in 4 ways. Number 1, a society of cardinals, the overseer of foreign missions, also the College of Propaganda at Rome, founded by Pope Urban VIII in 1627 for education or a missionary priest, the Sacred College de Propaganda Fidei. 2, hence, any institution or scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. 3, effort directly systematically towards the gaining of public support for opinion or a course of action. 4, the principle advanced by a propaganda. The Scientific American, in a recent issue, pleads for the restoration of to respectable uses of that fine old word propaganda. There is no word in the English language, it says, whose meaning has been so sadly distorted as the word propaganda. The change took place mainly during the late war when the term took on a decidedly sinister complexion. If you turn to the Standard Dictionary, you will find that the word was applied to congregation or society of cardinals for the care, oversight of foreign missions, which was instituted at Rome in the year 1627. It was applied also to the College of Propaganda at Rome that was founded by Pope Urban VIII for the education of the missionary priests. Hence, in later years, the word came to be applied to any institution or scheme for propagating a doctrine or system. Judged by this definition, we can see that in its true sense, propaganda is a perfect legitimate form of human activity. Any society, whether it be social, religious, or political, which is possessed of certain beliefs and sets out to make them known, either by the spoken or written word, is practical propaganda. Truth is mighty and must prevail, and any body of men believe that they have discovered a valuable truth is not merely their privilege, but their duty to disseminate that truth if they realize, as they quickly must, that the spreading of the truth can be done on a large scale and effectively only by organized effort. They will make use of the press and the platform as the best means to give it wide circulation. Propaganda becomes vicious and reprehensible only when its authors consciously and deliberately disseminate what they know to be lies, or when they aim at effects which they know to be perjury to the common good. Propaganda, in its proper meaning, is a perfectly wholesome word of honest patriotism and with an honorable history. The fact that it should today be carrying a sinister meaning merely shows how much of the child remains in the average adult. Not necessarily. A group of Yiddish citizens writes and talks in favor of a certain course of action in some debatable questions, believing that it's promoting their best interests of the community. Propaganda? Not a bit of it, just a plain forceful statement of truth. But let another group of citizens express opposing views, and they are promptly labeled with the sinister name of propaganda. What is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, says a wise old proverb. Let us make haste to put this fine old word back where it belongs and restore its dignified significance for the use of our children and our children's children. The extent to which propaganda shapes the progress of affairs about us may surprise even well-informed persons. Nevertheless, it is only necessary to look under the surface of the newspaper for a hint as to propaganda authority over public opinion. You hear that? That's another book that he wrote, Public Opinion. They used that by political polls. That's how they started this, folks. That goes all back to that. Also goes back to Tavistock, which you know that Bernays was involved and Walter Lippmann were both involved with Tavistock. Page 1 of the New York Times on the day these paragraphs are written contains 8 important news stories. 4 of them, or one half, are propaganda. The casual reader accepts them as accounts of spontaneous happenings. What are they? Here are the headlines which announce them. 12 nations warn China real reform must come before they give relief. Pritchard reports Zionism will fail. 3, reality men demand a transit inquiry. 4, our living standards highest in history, says Herbert Hoover report. Take them in order. The article on China explains the joint report of the commissions on extraterritorial in China, presenting an exposition of the power stand in the Chinese model. What is said is less important than what it is. It was made public by the State Department today with the purpose of presenting to the American public a picture of the State Department position. Its source gives authority, and the American public tends to accept and support the State Department's view. The report, Dr. Pritchard, trustee of the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace, is an attempt to find the facts about this Jewish colony in the midst of a restless Arab world. When Dr. Pritchard survey convinced him that in the long run, Zionists would bring more bitterness and more unhappiness both for the Jew and for the Arab. This point of view was broadcast with all the authority of the Carnegie Foundation so that the public would hear and believe. The statement by the president of the Real Estate Board of New York and Secretary Hoover's report are similar attempts to influence the public towards an opinion. These examples are not given to create the impression that there is anything sinister about propaganda. They are set down rather to illustrate how conscious direction is given to events and how the men behind these events influence public opinion. As such, they are examples of modern propaganda. At this point, we may attempt to define propaganda. Modern propaganda is a consistent and enduring effort to create or shape events to influence the relations of the public to an enterprise, idea, or group. This practice of creating circumstances or creating pictures in the minds of millions of people is very common. Virtually no important undertaking is now carried on without it, whether the enterprise be building a cathedral, endowing a university, marketing a moving picture, floating a large bond issue, or electing a president. Sometimes the effect on the public is created by a professional propagandist, sometimes by an amateur disputed for the job. The important thing is that it is universal and continuous, and in its sum total is regimented the public mind every bit as much as the army regiments the body of the soldiers. So vast are the numbers of minds which can be regimented, and so tenaciously are they when regimented that a group at times offers an irresistible pressure before which legislation, editors, and teachers are helpless. The group will cling to its stereotypes, as Walter Lippmann calls it, making of those supposedly powerful beings the leader of public opinion mere bits of driftwood in the surf. When an imperial wizard, sensing what is perhaps hungry for an idea, offers a picture of a nation all Nordics and nationalistic, not the common man of the old American stock, feeling himself elbowed out of his rightful position and prosperity by the newer immigrant stocks, grasps the picture which fits in so neatly with his prejudice and makes it his own. He buys the sheet and pillowcase costume and bands with his fellows by the thousands to a huge, powerful enough to swing state elections and to throw a ponderous monkey wrench into a national convention. In our present, social organizations' approval of the public is essential to any large undertaking. Hence, a laudable movement may be lost unless it impresses itself on the public mind. Charity, as well as business, and politics and literature, for that matter, have had to adopt propaganda. The public must be regimented into giving money, just as it must be regimented into tuberculosis help. The Near East Relief, the Association for the Improvement of the Conditions of the Poor of New York, and all the rest have to work on public opinion just as though they had tubes of toothpaste to sell. We are proud of our diminishing infant death rate, and that too is the work of propaganda. Propaganda does exist on all sides of us, and it does change our mental pictures of the world, even if this be unduly pessimistic, and that remains to be proved. The opinions reflect a tendency that is undoubtedly real. In fact, its use is growing as efficiency in gaining public support and is recognized. This evidently indicates the fact that anyone with sufficient influences can lead sections of the public, at least for a time and for the given purpose. Formerly, the rulers were the leaders. They laid out the course of history by the simple process of doing what they wanted. And nowadays, the successors of the rulers, those who position or ability gives them power, can no longer do what they want without the approval of the masses. They find in propaganda a tool which is increasingly powerful in gaining that approval. Therefore, propaganda is here to stay. What they're looking for, folks, if you see through the deal here, the kings and all that was based upon the whole belief that they were taught another form of propaganda, that the king was appointed by God. You see, this is why they did these certain things in the past. And that has changed because simply as we moved away from that type of form of government with what we call royalty or kingdom to a quote unquote, supposedly, where people make a decision about who they vote for or not. So that's what they're saying here. But what they need to say is they're looking for your consent. That's what they need. They're looking for your energy and consent of what they're doing, you see. And they'll dress it up, you see, and make it sound really good, so to speak. Okay. It was, of course, the astounding success of propaganda during the war that opened the eyes of the intelligent few in all departments of life to the possibilities of regimenting the public mind. The American government and numerous patriotic agencies developed a technique which is to most persons accustomed to bidding for public acceptance was new. They not only appeal to the individual by means of every approach, visible, graphic, and auditorial, to support the national endeavor, but they also secured the cooperation of the key men in every group, persons whose mere word carried authority to hundreds or thousands of followers. They thus automatically gained the support of fraternal, religious, commercial, patriotic, social, and local groups whose members took their opinions from their accustomed leaders and spokespeople, or from the periodical publications which they were accustomed to read and believe. At the same time, the manipulators of the patriotic opinion make use of the mental cliches and the emotional habits of the public to produce mass reaction against the alleged atrocities, the terror, and the tyranny of the enemy. It was only natural after the war ended that intelligent person should ask themselves whether it was possible to apply a similar technique to the problem of peace. As a matter of fact, the practice of propaganda since the war has assumed very different forms from those prevalent 20 years ago. This new technique may fairly be called a new propaganda. It takes into account not merely of the individual, not even of the mass mind alone, but also and especially of the anatomy of society, which is interlocking group formations and loyalties. It sees the individual not only as a cell in the social organization, but as a cell organized into a social unit. Touch a nerve at a sensitive spot and you get an automatic response from certain specific members of the organism. Business offers graphic examples of the effect that they may be produced upon the public by interesting groups, such as textile manufacturers losing their markets. This problem arose not long ago when the velvet manufacturers were facing ruin because their product had long been out of fashion. Analysis showing that it was impossible to revive a velvet fashion within America and an immediate hunt for the vital spot. Paris, obviously, but yes and no. Paris is the home of fashion. Lyon is the home of silk. The attack had to be made at the source. It was determined to substitute purpose for change and to utilize the regular sources for fashion distribution and to influence the public from these sources. A velvet fashion service openly supported by the manufacturers was organized. Its first function was to establish contact with the Lyon manufacturers and the Paris connoisseurs to discover what they were doing, to encourage them to act on behalf of velvet and to help in the proper exploitation of their wares. Intelligent Parisians were enlisted to work. You visit Lanvin, Lanvin, and Worth, WRTH, Agnes, Agnes, and Patou, Patou, and others, and induced them to use velvet in their gowns and hats. It was he who arranged with the distinguished countess, this or duchess, that, to wear the hat or the gown. As for the presentation of the idea to the public, the American buyer or the American woman of fashion was simply shown the velvet creations into an atelier of the dressmaker or the miller. That is, she brought the velvet because she liked it and because it was in fashion. just like they do today, folks. It's all, it's in fashion. They change fashions too, you see. You look around you, what clothes are in vogue and then what are not. Music's the same way. They control all that, you see. There's more than that, though. The editions of the editors of American magazines and fashion reporters of the American newspaper, likewise subject to their actual, although created circumstances, reflected it in their news, which in turn subjected the buyer and the consumer here to the same influences. See, what's happening here is that he's talking about business, but what he's saying simply here is that the public now is becoming what I call a whole. And so what happens, they want to create this whole of people working in continuity to buy certain things or to support certain things. Because now what's happening is that the independent spirit is being destroyed. And people say, no, I'm not going to buy that. This is not what I want. I can't afford it. Or this is not, I don't need this. In other words, why should I change my fashions, especially a woman, but even in men, but mainly a woman, simply every 2 or 3 years? You see, this is how they sell things, you see. Let's see where we at here. The result was that what was as at first a trickle of velvet became a flood. Demand was slowly but deliberately created in Paris and America. A big department store aiming to be a style leader advertised velvet gowns and hats on the authority of the French courtiers and quoted original cables received from them. The echo of the new style was heard from hundreds of department stores throughout the country which wanted to be style leaders too. Bulletins followed dispatchers. The mail followed the cables, and the American woman traveler appeared before the ship news photographers in velvet gowns and hats. Creative circumstances had their effect. Fickle faction had veered to velvet, was one newspaper comment, and the industry of the United States again kept thousands busy. The new propaganda, having regard to the constitution of society as a whole, not infrequently serves to focus and realize the desires of the masses. It's always about the masses, folks. The desire for pacific reform, however widespread, cannot be translated into action until it is made articulate and until it has exerted sufficient pressure upon the proper law-making bodies. Millions of housewives may feel that manufactured foods deleterious to their health should be prohibited, but there is little chance that their individual desires will be translated to effective legal form unless their half-expressed demands can be organized, made vocal, and concentrated upon the state legislature or upon the federal Congress in some mode which will produce the results they desire. Whether they realize it or not, they call upon propaganda to organize and effectively their demands. But clearly, it is the intelligent minorities which need to make us a propaganda continuously and systematically. In the act of proselytizing minorities in whom selfish interests and public interests coincide, that is the lie to progress and develop of America. Only through the active energy of the intelligent few can the public at large become aware of and act upon new ideas. Small groups of persons can and do make the rest of us think what they please about a given subject, but there are unusual proponents and opponents of every propaganda, both of whom are equally eager to convince the majority. So that's the conclusion of chapter 2 tonight with Propaganda by Edward Bernays. Thank you for being here. It's about 24 minutes. I don't want to make it too much longer. So I appreciate you being here. We'll do another chapter maybe tonight. And thank you for being here. Hope that this will fill in. I think it's been 2 or 3 weeks since I read a chapter out of Propaganda. Like to get these books read, but I had some issues with my back about a week. It's kind of set me back. So anyway, thank you for being here and enjoy and have a good evening.